Welcome to Marianas Press. We are at the CNMI Delegate's office, and we are now joining with CNMI Delegate herself, Kimberlyn King-Hinds. Welcome back to Saipan. I understand it's also your first time in this office.
It is my first day in the office, and I'm really excited to be home. It's been really cold in DC, and so, everybody knows that I'm a runner, right? And to be able to come back and just hit the streets and feel the island, there's nothing that beats it. So
and I saw you were running this morning being chased by some dogs in the neighborhood.
I was. Normally, they don't get excited, but I think it's because I've been gone for a little while, so they're not used to the scent that early in the morning. And so that, I was just like, I just look them straight in the eye and say, hey,
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us. I know you just returned after a month in DC. A lot has happened. So I'll ask you a broad question first. Just how have your first few days in office been? What has it been like in Washington?
A lot of it, to be honest, Tomas, is laying the foundation, right? And by laying the foundation, I mean, there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who do not know that we exist, right? We have people who are still calling us the Northern Marinara Islands, the Northern Marina Islands, who don't know exactly where we're at. And so if you're not in the committees that directly appropriate funds with regards to the military expansion out here, then you're not familiar with where the Marianas is, or where even Guam is, or American Samoa. And so, I've spent much of this first month just trying to reach out to different people across both aisles, right? To have these conversations about who we are and what our challenges are. And, what's very interesting is that we have a lot in common with people who come from rural communities. Issues with regards to transportation, issues with the economy, one-size-fits-all federal policies impacting small communities. And so I think that there are a lot of common grounds that we, that we share, and that I'm looking forward to building on to be able to elevate some of, the issues with our economy, right, with just folks from both sides of the aisle.
And I know you're a member of various committees and subcommittees at this point. I just wanted to get an update. So you're a member of the Veterans Committee?
Yes.
You're on a subcommittee for small business?
I'm actually a member of the committee itself, and I've been assigned to 2 different subcommittees.
And what are they?
One has to do with economic development, and then the other one, I think, it relates to the loan programs that are available out there.
And then the last committee is transportation and infrastructure.
Transportation and infrastructure, and we just got our subcommittee assignments, and one of my major asks was to be on the aviation committee, which I'm really happy to have been appointed to.
And why these 3 committees?
Well, so we were asked to give our top 5, right? And my top pick was obviously transportation and infrastructure, because a lot of the issues as it relates to our economy can be directly attributed to our challenges with transportation and our infrastructure. And so I wanted to be a part of that conversation in terms of shaping these reauthorization legislation that, appropriates funding to be able to address some of our infrastructure needs. And so one of the subcommittees that I've been appointed to on transportation and infrastructure is just the one that has oversight over a federal highway, right? And as we all know, the formula as it has been applied to the CNMI has remained the same over the course of so many years. I think the reauthorization this year allocates about $49 million to the territories, and that formula basically is broken down to 40% to Guam, 40% to, I want to say, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and 10% to American Samoa, and 10% to the CNMI. So if you were to literally translate that into actual dollars, 10% of 49 million is only $4.9 million, right, for federal highway, right? And well, we all know that to pave 1 mile of road costs about that much. And so, how do we look at this formula that is not prescribed by Congress, but is actually prescribed by the agency itself, and to change it so that we can address some of these challenges that we have with regards to our road infrastructure.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in covering the delegate as a journalist, I often see the approach in terms of, what is the federal program and how do we tweak it for our needs? Are there any kind of CNMI originating ideas, thoughts, or national programs that you want to bring in terms of addressing our economic issues that start from here rather than starting from DC and then translating it to here?
So, at this point in time, what I'm trying to get a better grasp of and trying to get an inventory of, right, are all these different programs that are currently available, that are in existence, and looking at how we can bring some parity with regards to those programs here, instead of trying to reinvent some sort of wheel, right? And then obviously, to your point, looking at these programs and figuring out how to tweak it so that it best addresses our issues. We are in a climate now with the Trump administration where, they are looking at reforming some of these programs to ensure that, waste is eliminated and that these programs are run more efficiently. And we are in the process now of having a conversation about reconciliation, right? Putting together one big bill that addresses some of these issues. And in these conversations, people are looking for reform. And so at this point in time, asking, for something beyond that, beyond what already exists, is going to be a challenge because you can't do that in a reconciliation bill, right? And so, like, how do we look at what's already there, right? And figure out how to tweak it so that we can get some of our needs met.
Right, and I asked that question partly because my understanding of a lot of the reform is that he wants to empower state governments.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
This administration in particular.
Yes.
And so, all right. So that's what's being worked on.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about the climate.
Yeah.
In DC. You notably said at one of the general meetings here before you went there that you'll worry about the politics and we'll be focused on the policy. Mm-hmm. Just what has that been like to be in the center of this political storm that we see on the news, national news every day, in what people call a divided Congress?
Yeah. So I'll say this, right, is, the news cycle in America is based on a 24-hour coverage, right? And I think that there are some people that I like to call Pollywood, right? They're the Hollywood types of the political world who like to be on television, and the way that you get on television is to make these very, strong points, right? Using certain types of rhetoric. And there's people like that. But when you sit behind closed doors and you're actually sitting in these committees, and I sit on 3 committees that are very bipartisan, right? Who really want to work together to address some of these challenges. The tone is very different. And so what you see on television is not necessarily reflective of what is actually happening. Now, obviously, you do have, 2 political parties with diverging political philosophies. But at the end of the day, everybody, wants the same thing. And I'll give you an example, right? Everybody is up in arms right now with regards to, what is happening with regards to immigration, right? Immigration is such a hot topic, right? And everybody wants to paint that issue as just a Republican initiative. But if you sit down and have conversations with just different people across the aisle, it's a serious concern for everybody. And it's a serious concern for everybody because, you're talking about very limited resources that are being taken away from the states in terms of being able to live up to these federal mandates. And so how do we all kind of sit together and address the issue, right? You have folks from different districts, on both sides of the party, who are very concerned about, the flow of drugs, specifically fentanyl, and how the flow of these drugs are being moved by a cartel coming through the Mexico border, right? And you're not just seeing it down at the border states, you're seeing it in states like as north as Washington State, right? Everybody's concerned. And so I think a lot of this, right, you have to rally the team. And the way you rally the team, you rally the base, is by, putting out these sometimes incendiary talking points. But when you actually sit down in these committees or, in these subcommittees, I think there's a general agreement that there is an issue and that it has to be addressed, right?
I know there's been a lot of rumors and even photos on social media circulating about ICE enforcement of, the quote-unquote raids happening across the country. And Marianas Press was actually able to get a statement from ICE, which you can read on our social media. But in short, it says, ICE does not conduct raids or sweeps, nor does the agency operate roadblocks or checkpoints. ICE's enforcement resources are based on intelligence-driven leads, and ICE officers do not target non-citizens indiscriminately. A lot of people these days are asking, how does Trump's policies affect the Marianas? What would you say to those who are concerned about, the executive order about immigration and you're our voice in Washington? So what do you have to say to the constituents who are concerned that they might be deported? Well,
thank you for that question, because we have received a lot of inquiries with regards to the numerous executive orders which have been signed, right? There's been a slew of them. And first, let me just say that in terms of how these federal agencies are going to effectuate some of those federal, some of those executive orders, remains to be, it needs to be vetted out, right? Because there's an issue with regards to constitutional authority, right? But with regards to your specific question as to, just the raids with regards to illegal immigration, hey, listen, I believe in law enforcement, right? What I care about the most is the ability of the CNMI to be economically self-sustainable. And a lot of the conversations that we're having around our ability to be economically self-sustainable is being directly tied into some of these issues that crop up, whether it be birth tourism or other immigration-related offenses, right? Well, why are those things happening? Well, as we all know, when we were federalized, right, immigration and labor was federalized, that did not come with funding. That did not come with law enforcement support, right? Which has left gaps in the system that has created this narrative that the CNMI can't handle its business, right? A business that it does not have oversight or responsibility over. And so, the Trump administration is committed and focused on providing immigration and empowering immigration officers to be able to actually effectively do their jobs, to give them the resources. And so I welcome that, because, in order for us to be able to continue to have these carve-outs that we are asking for, right, to ensure that we are economically viable, we also need to be able to enforce the laws as it relates to immigration, to ensuring that bad actors, right, those with bad intent, are addressed in the manner in which it should be addressed, right? And so, this is a conversation that this community needs to have a coming to Jesus moment about, right? In terms of who we are, where we want to go, and what really matters at the end of the day. I empathize and I sympathize with folks who are going to be impacted, right? But at the end of the day, we have to focus on a priority. And my priority right now is ensuring that we have the ability to be economically self-sustainable so that this community can continue to exist, right? And so that everybody who lives here have a shot at a better life, and that we're all not lining up to get food stamps because the federal government basically shuts down or takes away all these carve-out exemption because of the lack of enforcement, which is not our obligation to begin with.
You mentioned birth tourism. I'll get to that, but before, I just did want to follow up based on your answer. What does that mean for our workforce?
What does that mean?
To immigration and the national conversation about immigration.
With regards to the enforcement?
Yes.
Well, I think that that's a conversation that's being had across America, right? I mean, if you turn on the news, you have these rural communities who rely on farming, right? These small businesses, farmers, right? Whose employees are not showing up because of fear of deportation. And so these are all things that we as a country need to have a conversation about, and that issue is directly tied into labor shortage, right? And so, you know, we are trying to oversimplify this conversation by pointing out the problem. The problem is illegal immigration, right? Well, why are we having problems with legal immigration? Well, there's a demand for worker, and there's a labor shortage in America. And when we have these conversations, we have to have it in the context of why we're having these issues to begin with, right? And it's the same situation here, right? Why is it that we have all these overstayers here and, you know, these underground employments? It's because we have a labor shortage, and this is why I'm deeply committed and focused on finally addressing, you know, this this worker shortage problem, because that's what the problem is, right? This is how that situation arises, right? It's systemic of the underlying issue, and it's the same here. It's the same in places across America.
Saipan rarely gets mentioned by U.S. Congress specifically by name, and you saw Congressman Tom Tiffany call out birth tourism in the Marianas. Obviously, I think people know now after we got the data from both you and CHCC that there were some falsehoods there, at least for the data that for the past decade or so. But just what's your take on that? I know you already commented that you agree birth tourism is an issue, but moving forward, given Congress's interests, at least Congressman Tiffany, what are the next steps there for that issue?
Well, I think, you know, going back to what I said earlier, is that we have our work cut out for us in terms of educating members of Congress, right, about our unique status, right, the challenges that we have here. And there needs to be a decision made with regards to what it is that we want to do for this economy, right? Does Congress literally just want to resolve this issue by saying, here's some money, right, and that'll cure it, which we know, by the way, is not the solution? Or do we actually sit down and have a meaningful conversation about, you know, why we need these carve-outs to begin with, right? And it's directly tied into our political contract, right, the covenant. You have oversight over national security. We have the right to be able to self-governing, and you can't self-govern when you don't have an economy. And so how do we have those conversations, right, without, you know, too often we have these conversations in a manner where we're trying to win an argument. I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to find a solution. We know that birth tourism is a problem not just here in the CNMI. It's a problem across the United States. We've been singled out because some of the carve-outs in our immigration policy that has allowed us to be economically self-sustainable, right? The problem is that the federal government has taken over labor and immigration without providing the CNMI the proper resources and support to be able to actually effectively secure our borders. And so, you know, I welcome some of these investments that the federal government is looking at making through the Trump administration to actually now provide the folks here on the ground to effectively do their jobs.
You know, we got We got hundreds of comments on that story that we posted. One of them, was a suggestion about restrictions, and this is an initiative from the Trump administration to either, some sort of restriction on birthright citizenship. Where do you stand on that?
I've always been one who is willing to do whatever it takes, okay? But also, that decision is not up to me. And this conversation is not new. As a matter of fact, I think, the legislature was involved some time ago when they passed, as reflected in the resolution that they passed, basically consenting, right, to amend the covenant to allow for restrictions on birthright tourism. I am open to looking at any possible solution to allow us to be able to be economically self-sustainable, to allow businesses here to thrive. It's going to be a give and take, but that's not a decision that I'm going to make myself. And this is why, I've scheduled a meeting with the legislature, specifically the Federal Relations Committee in both the House and the Senate to begin having these conversations, right? We have to be united on a vision moving forward, right? And we have to vet out some of these ideas, what we're willing to do or not do. So I think that definitely is a conversation that I'm willing to have. But in terms of stating a position at this point in time without the input of the people is premature.
And I know in your comment, to be fair, you didn't note that birthright citizenship to us also comes through the covenant, right?
Exactly.
Section 3 of the covenant.
Yeah. So, right.
So there would be some implication there, possibly.
Possibly, but you can't amend the covenant without our consent, right? Exactly. And so this is why anything as it relates to the covenant needs to involve the community, and that's something. Should the time come, I'm willing to bring forth to the people to have that conversation through public hearings.
All right. My next question stems from a statement that the NMI Democratic Party put out. Obviously, to note, you're our first Republican delegate in office. Here's their statement. Quote, "It is worth asking whether Governor Palacios, Delegate King-Hinds, and the NMI Republican Party are on board with Trump's America. We are not. We will resist. We will hold Donald Trump, the National GOP, and the NMI GOP accountable." This is again coming from the NMI Democratic Party, perhaps not surprisingly. What's your response to the party?
Hey, listen, man. The people have spoken, right? And the people have elected Donald Trump as our president. At the end of the day, this is not about one person in particular. This is about the people of the Commonwealth. And if that is the position of the Democratic Party, then that's their position. But I have a duty to the people, and that comes first. This is not about me and my feelings, right, or my personal opinions on any particular issue. This is about how do we go about ensuring that every single person who calls these islands home have a better opportunity without having to leave the CNMI, period. And if I'm not talking about how we can improve the economy and finding ways to work across both aisles to be able to effectively and efficiently advance the interests of the people of the CNMI, then I'm not representing every single person who calls these islands home.
All right. And speaking of the issues that impact us, I know you ran on and supported the reinstatement of Annex 6. Tourism from China, we've had this conversation over and over, right? What's your response to those who say, given the sentiment about China, the PRC, that some of these things you campaigned on might not be possible? Yeah, what's your response, and how do you get it through a Congress that has said China is our largest adversary to the United States?
So I think there's a difference, right, between China as the government and tourists, right? And I think in the conversations that I've been having with members of Congress, they understand that distinction, because there are states who heavily rely on tourism as well to be able to support their economies. California, being the largest state, is one of them, right? And so the one thing that I have realized about President Trump is that he's open to change his mind about certain issues, right? He's very economic growth driven, and he's willing to make deals with people to be able to grow the economy. With regards to Annex 6, I think that's a regulatory issue that can be handled by the Department of Transportation, right? We are waiting for the nominee to be confirmed, and we have reached out, and we have received a response in terms of just requesting to give them more time to be able to just get situated as new folks come in and start learning the ropes and getting situated with regards to some of their new duties and responsibilities. And so that's a conversation that I'm very excited to have with the Department of Transportation, because, hey, listen, one of the things that people are not realizing with regards to that conversation, right? The ports receives federal funding, and as a condition of receiving that federal funding, the ports has to find a way to be economically self-sustainable, right? And so if it's not economically self-sustainable, this investment that's being made by the FAA, right? What would be the point, right? You're basically setting up these small ports for failure if you're not giving them the opportunity to be able to expand markets and to welcome all markets so that they can generate that revenue, to be able to, for example, meet federal matching requirements, right? To be able to live up to its federal obligations that are placed on them as part of these, grant assurance requirements, right? And so I think that people are looking at Annex 6 as a part of this larger geopolitical conflict, but it's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot more nuanced in terms of and by everybody, I'm saying both Democrats and Republicans, right? Everybody's desire to be able to have some of these agencies be self-sustainable. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, and my job is to advocate to ensure that our ports remain viable, especially now that duty-free has announced, right, that it's going to pull out. Because if we're seeing a decline on arrivals because Jeju, has pulled out additional flights, and now duty-free, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen in terms of their ability to keep operations, right, at where it's at now, to keep the employees, to meet their federal obligations?
I know that also involves working with the governor, and I know you had a meeting in D.C. What can you tell us about that meeting?
So a lot of that conversation, right, is about just the different committees that I'm in, and I was giving him heads up on some of the conversations, right, and the types of things that we should be focused on. I did share with them that I'm very committed to finding some relief for our utilities ratepayer, and I do believe in my heart that replacing, our power generation system, right, modernizing it, right, is critical to that piece. Even if the plan is to pursue a public-private partnership, right? So, that conversation was primarily about some of those priorities.
All right. These next 100 days, what are your priorities? What are you hoping to achieve here while you're in the CNMI and in Washington when you're there?
So, while I'm home, I would like to, in as much as possible, be in tune with what's happening with people, right? I am just one of those people who would like to hear firsthand right? What's going on? I want to hear the struggles. I want to hear the challenges. I want to also hear the successes, right? And congratulations to you for winning the Trailblazing Award, and it makes me really proud because what you're doing basically highlights, right, one of many success stories in our community about people who have gone away and who choose to come back and stay invested in this community. And so, in these conversations, we do have a lot of challenges, but like we also need to take time out to celebrate, right, those successes and highlight those. And so, coming back to the district is important to be able to just be in tune with the pulse of the community, right? Because it's important that when I am in DC, I am able to say, hey, listen, I just spoke to Joe from Precinct 4. And these are Joe's challenges with regards to Medicaid. These are Maria's challenges with regards to Social Security. This is Juan's challenges with regards to veteran services, right? I think that too often we have these conversations in broad generalizations, but when you actually talk to people and see the process and hear from them how the process is affecting them, it allows me to better understand how I can effectively advocate when I sit in these rooms, especially in these subcommittees where we're bringing in witnesses, right, from the community there in the States or agencies out in the States to be able to ask the right questions and to be able to make suggestions in terms of some of these policies that folks are trying to change.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. I know you have a busy, busy day, busy term ahead. Is there anything else you'd like our public to know? I know you've launched your social media pages. There's your newsletter, Catch Up with Kim, that comes out every week. And so, of course, if you want to catch up with her, that's one way.
Yeah,
but anything else you'd like to let them know?
I think, right, in these conversations, I know that when something new is happening, and obviously we're entering into a new administration, and there's just a lot of different information that is out there, right? I think it's very important for all of us to understand, right, what is fact and what is fiction, what is rumor, what is good information, and I pledge to, as much as possible, provide you with regular updates as to what's happening in Washington, D.C. I had planned to do that anyway, but this first month has just been adjusting and getting to know the lay of the land and getting to a groove in terms of schedule, right? But I do, aside and separate from the social media and the newsletter, to come and do regular updates and record them and publish them. But I encourage all of you, right, to seek good information when you are to seek good information and not to assume that things are happening based on social media posts, right? Because I think a lot of times a lot of people get anxious, right? Because they hear or see different things on different platforms, and they get stressed out. And when you actually start digging into some of the information that's being put out there, it's not necessarily good information. And so I encourage all of you, to follow credible sources, right? MP being one of them. They've been trying to keep you up to date and very well informed with regards to some of these issues. And so please do that. Feel free to reach out to our district office here for any services that we can assist with regards to federal program. In the coming weeks, we will be putting out more information as to what types of services this office provides. One of the things that I'm deeply committed to is ensuring that this office is very community-centric, very public service driven, and we're doing a little bit more than just, saying, hey, we're here. We're actually going to be doing some outreach, going to different communities, having town halls on Tinian and on Rhoda in the next couple of months. We're just getting into the groove of, scheduling that and that ensuring that the public is well informed as to what your delegate's office is up to, but also hearing from you, the community, right? What are the things that we should be focusing on in terms of some of these programs and services so that we can effectively be your advocate and we can effectively serve you. So that's about it.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to catch up with you. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Sure it'll be the
We
first
should do
of
this
many.
regularly.
All right.
Regularly.
It's scheduled.
Every
It's set.
time I come into town, we're going to come and just sit down and have this conversation because it is important, right? I believe in transparency and having these conversations holds me accountable in service, in giving service to our community. So thank you.
All right, Delegate, thanks so much, and thank you for joining us. Of course, you can follow us at marianaspress.com.